Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us again at Unheard Stories, where we dive deep into the most jaw-dropping tales of betrayal, revenge, and resilience. Before we jump in, let me ask you, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what we've got coming next. Today's story is not just about infidelity. It's about deception so cruel, it shattered lives. It's about betrayal so calculated, it left scars deeper than any wound. And yet, it's also about the strength it takes to rise from ashes and seek the sweetest revenge. What started as a picture-perfect family life turned into a battlefield where love, loyalty, and trust were weaponized. But here's the twist. This betrayal didn't just break its victims. It forged them into something unstoppable. Imagine being blindsided by the very people you trusted most. Imagine the person you shared your life with systematically destroying everything you built together. But now imagine finding the courage to fight back, not with violence but with precision, intellect, and an iron will. This story has it all. Infidelity, sabotage, a brilliant revenge plot, and a resolution that will leave you speechless. For years, the Claremont family appeared to have it all. Charles Claremont was the kind of man people admired, an entrepreneur who built his business empire from the ground up, a devoted husband and a doting father. His wife, Victoria, was the epitome of elegance, a socialite adored for her charm and poise. Together, they were the picture-perfect couple, their every public appearance a testament to their seemingly unshakable bond. They lived in a sprawling estate with their daughter, Elena, excelling in school and preparing for a future destined to be bright. But beneath this glimmering surface lay shadows no one could see. Charles's daily routine was meticulous. Early morning gym sessions, power meetings at his headquarters, and dinner with his family. His disciplined lifestyle had earned him the nickname the Machine among his peers. Victoria, meanwhile, spent her days organizing charity events and mingling with society's elite. Their daughter, Elena, balanced a rigorous academic schedule with an array of extracurricular activities. Their lives seemed full and perfect, leaving no room for doubts about their unity. Yet Victoria's late-night outings had grown more frequent in recent months. Always excused as charity planning sessions, they began to stretch longer into the night. Charles, ever trusting, didn't question her. After all, wasn't trust the cornerstone of their relationship? Elena, however, noticed the shift. Her mother's absence at her debate tournaments, the distracted nods when Elena shared her dreams of going to Ivy League schools, it was like Victoria's attention was slipping elsewhere. Then there were the phone calls. Victoria would step into another room, her voice low, her tone playful. The subtle changes were small but undeniable. A new perfume that Charles didn't recognize, a shift in her wardrobe to more daring pieces. Charles rationalized it as harmless. He had too much on his plate to entertain paranoia. But one evening something strange happened. A fleeting glimpse of an unfamiliar name flashed on Victoria's phone while it lay on the kitchen counter. It was Graham, and the text read, "Can't wait for our next rendezvous." A wave of unease passed through Charles, but he brushed it aside. Victoria's world was filled with people he barely knew. Donors, volunteers, collaborators. Still, something about that name gnawed at him. Meanwhile, Victoria was no longer the only one harboring secrets. At work, Charles's trusted CFO, Lucas, had started raising red flags about discrepancies in their financials. Several major accounts showed unusual withdrawals, sums large enough to suggest embezzlement. Charles, dismissing the possibility that his inner circle could betray him, assumed an accounting error. He couldn't afford distractions, especially with his company preparing for a major public offering. As days turned into weeks, Charles couldn't shake the feeling that his world was shifting, imperceptibly but dangerously. He began to notice things he hadn't before. Victoria's smile, once warm and genuine, seemed rehearsed. Her eyes no longer sparkled when she looked at him. And then there was the dinner party. It was a small gathering, just close friends and colleagues, but Graham was there. Introduced as a longtime family friend, he charmed everyone with his easy demeanor and quick wit. Charles couldn't place why the man felt so familiar, why his name triggered a faint alarm. Victoria seemed at ease around him, perhaps a little too much so. The shared glances, the laughter that came too readily, it all felt too practiced. For the first time in his life, Charles felt the faint tremor of doubt. As the Claremonts said goodnight to their guests and the house settled into silence, Charles found himself staring at the ceiling. Something wasn't right. And as he lay there, his mind racing, he couldn't shake the feeling that Graham was more than a family friend, and that the cracks in his perfect world were about to shatter wide open. The unraveling of the Claremont family began on an otherwise ordinary Wednesday evening. Charles had come home later than usual, his briefcase weighed down not just with work but with a growing sense of unease. Victoria greeted him at the door, her usual bright smile absent. "Long day?" she asked, her tone light but distant. "Always," Charles replied, forcing a smile. Something about the way she avoided his eyes made his chest tighten. That night, as Victoria disappeared into her study to work on charity plans, Charles found himself pacing the living room. His thoughts circled back to Graham, the way he seemed too comfortable in their home, the easy familiarity between him and Victoria. The name still tugged at his mind as though he should have remembered more. It wasn't until Elena came downstairs with her phone in hand that the first thread of truth began to unravel. "Dad, look at this," she whispered, her expression troubled. She handed him her phone, where a social media post from one of Victoria's friends displayed a photo. In it, Victoria and Graham were side by side at what appeared to be an upscale restaurant. The caption read, "When the charity feels more like romance, winky face." Charles felt the floor drop out from beneath him. His wife's explanation for her late nights had always been charity work. This picture, however, painted a very different story. "It's probably nothing," Elena offered hesitantly, sensing her father's tension. But Charles couldn't let it go. Not this time. The following day, Charles took a step he never imagined he'd take. He hired a private investigator. His instincts told him something was wrong, and now he needed proof he couldn't ignore or rationalize away. The investigator, a sharp-eyed man named Ryan, listened carefully as Charles described his suspicions. "Let me do the digging," Ryan said firmly. "But I need you to prepare yourself. If there's something to find, it might not be what you want to see." Days turned into an agonizing wait. Charles threw himself into work, hoping to distract himself, but his mind kept drifting to Victoria and Graham. Every unanswered call, every text that received a delayed response, it all seemed to confirm his worst fears. Finally, Ryan called. "We need to meet." They sat in a dimly lit cafe, Ryan's laptop open between them. "I followed Victoria over the past week," Ryan began, his voice low. "There's no easy way to say this. She's been meeting Graham regularly. It's not charity work." Ryan clicked through photos. Victoria and Graham at a luxurious hotel, their hands brushing across a table, the way they leaned into each other. In one, they were entering a suite together. The evidence was undeniable. Charles stared at the screen, his stomach twisting in knots. "How long?" he croaked. "Hard to say," Ryan admitted. "But this isn't new. There's more." "More?" Charles wasn't sure he could handle it, but Ryan pressed on. "Your financial discrepancies? They're connected. Victoria and Graham have been siphoning money from your accounts. It's methodical, small amounts at first, but they've escalated." Charles felt like the air had been knocked out of him. It wasn't just betrayal, it was calculated, cold, and cruel. His wife wasn't just cheating, she was actively working to destroy him. That evening, Charles returned home a different man. He didn't confront Victoria immediately. Instead, he observed her closely. She greeted him with the same practiced smile, made small talk about her hectic day, and disappeared into her study again. But something about her demeanor had changed. She seemed too polished, as if she were performing a role. The pieces began to fall into place. Victoria's sudden affection for luxury brands, her insistence on managing certain financial accounts, even her distant behavior, it was all part of her plan. That night, Charles decided to search her study. While she showered upstairs, he rifled through drawers, papers, and her computer. In a folder labeled Donor Contacts, he found something chilling: emails between Victoria and Graham. The messages detailed their affair in vivid language, but what caught Charles's attention was the talk of phasing him out. "We need to move quickly," one email read. "Once he's out of the picture, we can access everything." Access everything? Charles's blood ran cold. What did that mean? As he continued to dig, he found an even more horrifying discovery: a small box hidden at the back of a drawer. Inside were pills labeled as supplements. These were the same pills Victoria had been insisting he take for his stress. He pocketed one and resolved to have it tested. The test results confirmed Charles's worst fears. The supplements were laced with traces of mercury. The slow poisoning explained the headaches, fatigue, and brain fog he'd been experiencing. Victoria hadn't just betrayed him emotionally, she was trying to kill him. Charles confided in his sister Lauren, who immediately rallied to his side. "This isn't just an affair," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "This is a calculated attack. She's trying to ruin you financially, mentally, and physically." Lauren's support gave Charles the strength to confront the reality he'd been avoiding. His wife and her lover were not just cheaters, they were predators. The final blow came when Ryan uncovered another connection. Graham wasn't just a random lover. He had been involved in a string of similar schemes, targeting successful business owners through romantic partners. Victoria and Graham were partners in crime, and Charles was their latest victim. The next family dinner was eerily normal on the surface, but beneath the table Charles's fists were clenched tight. As Victoria poured herself a glass of wine, she smiled sweetly. "Elena, darling, don't forget about your college applications. I've been reaching out to some contacts on your behalf." Elena froze. "What do you mean? I've already submitted everything." "Oh, I just tweaked a few things," Victoria said lightly. "No big deal." But Charles knew better. He had already uncovered emails where Victoria had sabotaged Elena's applications, ensuring she'd only be accepted to schools that kept her close to home, and under her control. Something inside Charles snapped. His voice cut through the facade like a knife. "How long have you been planning this, Victoria?" Victoria's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. "What are you talking about?" "The affair. The money. The poison. All of it." The room fell silent. Elena's wide eyes darted between her parents. Victoria's expression turned cold, and for the first time Charles saw the real her, calculating, heartless, and unrepentant. "I don't know what you think you know," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "but you'll never prove it." Charles stood, his voice steady. "We'll see about that." As Victoria stormed out, slamming the door behind her, Charles turned to Elena. "I'm sorry you had to see that," he said quietly. Elena nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "What are we going to do, Dad?" Charles's jaw tightened. "We're going to fight." The days that followed felt like living in the aftermath of a storm. Charles could still hear the echoes of Victoria's defiance in his mind. Her cold words haunted him. "You'll never prove it." But Charles wasn't interested in proving anything to her. He was focused on survival and protection, especially for Elena. Victoria's departure left an eerie silence in the Claremont household. For years she had been the glue that held their image together. Now her absence only highlighted the cracks she had created. Elena, once a bright and ambitious student, had grown quiet. Her eyes, which had sparkled with excitement about college and her future, now looked hollow. "Dad, what if she's right?" Elena asked one evening, her voice trembling. "What if we can't prove anything? What if she wins?" Charles knelt beside her. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "This is about more than proving her wrong. This is about protecting what's left of our family. We may have been broken, but we're not defeated." "Not yet." Elena nodded, but her expression showed doubt. The betrayal had shaken her belief in stability, and Charles knew he had to rebuild not just their lives, but their trust in each other. As days turned into weeks, the effects of Victoria's poisoning became more apparent. Despite stopping the pills, Charles still felt the lingering symptoms: the foggy thoughts, the unexplained exhaustion. Lauren, his sister, insisted he see a doctor. The results confirmed what he feared. The mercury had left a lasting impact on his system. "Small doses over time," the doctor explained. "It's subtle but effective." She knew exactly what she was doing. The words filled Charles with equal parts rage and despair. How had he missed this? How had he allowed himself to be so vulnerable? But he couldn't afford self-pity. He had Elena to think about and a battle to fight. The full extent of Victoria's betrayal began to unfold when Charles and Lauren dug into Elena's college application records. As suspected, Victoria had tampered with them. Emails sent from Elena's account, emails Elena never wrote, declined acceptance offers from Ivy League universities. Instead, the only acceptance letter left standing was from a local community college. "Why would she do this to me?" Elena whispered, her voice breaking as she stared at the evidence. "I worked so hard. I deserve those offers." Charles felt his heart break for his daughter. "She didn't do this because of you," he said gently. "She did this because of me. Controlling you was a way to control me." Elena's pain turned to anger. "She wanted to make me small, just like she tried to make you weak." Charles placed a hand on her shoulder. "We're not going to let her win. We're going to take back everything she tried to steal from us." Meanwhile, Lauren had been working tirelessly to piece together the web of lies and crimes Victoria and Graham had spun. She discovered that Graham was no ordinary conman. He had a history of targeting successful families, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. Victoria wasn't his first accomplice, she was just his most ambitious one. Lauren also found a new ally in her search for justice. a seasoned investigator named Eric who had been tracking Graham for years. "He's slippery," Eric admitted during their first meeting. "But this time he's gotten too greedy. The evidence we've got on him could finally bring him down." Eric's involvement brought hope, but it also brought urgency. Graham and Victoria were still out there, free to continue their schemes. Time was not on their side. Charles knew they couldn't wait for the legal system to catch up. Graham and Victoria's actions weren't just criminal, they were personal. Every day that passed felt like a countdown to another betrayal, another attack. One evening, as Charles reviewed his dwindling financial records, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You're wasting your time. Give up while you can." He stared at the message, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the phone. "They're taunting us," Lauren said when he showed her the text. "They think they've already won?" Charles nodded, his jaw tightening. "Then it's time to remind them who they're dealing with." Elena, who had been quietly observing her father's determination, began to change. Her initial sadness and anger transformed into resolve. She stayed up late with Charles and Lauren, poring over documents, searching for anything they could use against Victoria and Graham. "They taught us to play their game," she said one night, her voice steady. "But now it's our turn to play it better." Lauren smiled. "You're more like your dad than you realize." Together they formed a plan. It wasn't just about exposing the truth, it was about reclaiming their lives and ensuring that Victoria and Graham could never hurt anyone else. The first step in their plan was a calculated move. Charles hosted a small gathering of trusted allies and business associates, carefully crafting the narrative of his return to strength. Victoria and Graham's goal had been to leave him broken and isolated, but Charles was determined to show the world otherwise. "Elena and I are rebuilding," he told the gathered group, his voice strong. "They tried to take everything from us, but they underestimated our resilience." The speech wasn't just for his audience, it was a message. He knew Victoria and Graham would hear about it, and he wanted them to know that he was far from defeated. Despite the pain and betrayal, the ordeal brought Charles, Elena, and Lauren closer than ever. They became a team, each contributing their strengths to the fight. Lauren's legal expertise, Charles's determination, and Elena's newfound courage formed an unbreakable bond. "You taught me how to stand tall," Elena told her father one night. "Now it's my turn to help you stand tall again." Charles smiled, pride filling his chest. "Together we'll make sure they regret ever trying to destroy us." As the Claremonts prepared for the next phase of their plan, a strange calm settled over their lives. It was the kind of calm that comes before a storm, a quiet determination that masked the chaos bubbling beneath the surface. Victoria and Graham still thought they held the upper hand. They believed their betrayal had broken the Claremonts. But they had no idea what was coming. Charles looked at his family, his daughter, his sister, and felt something he hadn't felt in months: hope. The storm was coming, but this time they were ready. The Claremonts knew that bringing Victoria and Graham down would require more than determination. It would demand proof so damning, so indisputable, that even the most skilled lawyer couldn't twist the truth. Charles, Elena, and Lauren worked tirelessly, connecting dots, uncovering hidden trails, and forming alliances with those who could help. One evening, as Charles combed through old financial statements, a realization struck him. There had been subtle inconsistencies dating back years, far before the obvious embezzlement began. Payments to a consulting firm he'd never approved. Transactions routed through unfamiliar accounts. "Elena, grab the files from 2019, Charles called. Together they pored over the paperwork. A name stood out: Lansbridge Consulting. "What's that?" Elena asked. Charles shook his head. "I don't remember ever hiring them." Lauren arrived moments later, phone in hand. "Eric just ran a check. Lansbridge Consulting is a front. It's connected to Graham." The discovery was a breakthrough. Lansbridge had funneled significant sums from Claremont Industries, linking Graham directly to the financial sabotage. But it wasn't enough. They needed more. Lauren suggested they reach out to an old acquaintance, Julia, Victoria's former friend, who had fallen out of favor with her years ago. Julia had once been close enough to Victoria to know her secrets, and Lauren suspected she might have a grudge to settle. Over coffee, Julia revealed more than they'd hoped. Victoria used to brag about how easy it was to manipulate people, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. She called Charles her golden ticket. But it wasn't until Graham entered the picture that things got serious. Julia handed over something that made Charles's stomach churn: a recording. In it, Victoria's voice was unmistakable. "Once we finish with Charles, we'll have everything we need," Victoria said. "He'll be too broken to fight back." It was damning evidence of premeditation, but Charles wanted to go deeper. He wanted to know just how far they were willing to go, and why. Lauren's instincts had been right all along. From the moment she'd noticed Charles's unexplained health decline, she suspected something sinister. Now, with the discovery of the mercury poisoning, she pushed harder. She contacted a toxicologist who confirmed that the levels in Charles's blood were consistent with long-term exposure. This wasn't accidental, the toxicologist explained. Someone was systematically poisoning you. Lauren took it further, requesting a detailed analysis of the supplements Victoria had been providing Charles. The results were chilling. Traces of mercury had been meticulously laced into the capsules, just enough to cause cognitive decline and physical weakness without raising immediate alarm. They wanted to make you doubt yourself, Lauren said, anger flashing in her eyes. They wanted you to think you were losing control. While Lauren dug into the poisoning, Elena made a shocking discovery. Late one night, as she scrolled through Victoria's old social media posts, she found a cryptic comment under a photo of a lavish vacation. The comment, from someone named Lance, read, "The first stage went perfectly. Let's celebrate when you're back." Elena clicked on Lance's profile and froze. The man in the pictures wasn't Graham, but he seemed eerily familiar. She ran to Charles and showed him the profile. "That's one of Graham's associates," Charles said, recognition dawning. "He was at a fundraiser Victoria hosted years ago." Eric confirmed Lance's connection to Graham. "He's part of their network," Eric explained. "They don't just target one person. They have a system, a well-oiled machine for destroying lives." With Eric's help, they pieced together a disturbing pattern. Graham and Victoria weren't working alone. They were part of a network that preyed on successful families, exploiting vulnerabilities for financial gain. Each member played a role. One to seduce, one to manipulate, and one to dismantle from the inside. "They've done this before," Eric said grimly, laying out files on other victims. "Different cities, different names, but the same method. The poisoned spouse, the embezzled money, the ruined careers. It's all there." The network's previous victims included CEOs, philanthropists, and even a retired judge. Each case ended the same way, with the victim left broken and the predators walking away richer. Charles felt his anger harden into resolve. "Not this time," he said. "This time they won't get away with it." As they built their case, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A former employee of Lansbridge Consulting reached out anonymously, offering insider information. Lauren and Eric met with him in a discreet location. "I've been scared to come forward," the man admitted, his voice shaking. "But I can't stay silent anymore. They ruined my life when I tried to leave." He handed over a USB drive containing detailed records of the consulting firm's activities. Among the files were emails between Graham and Victoria, discussing the plan to frame Charles for financial mismanagement. One email read, "Once the board turns on him, we'll have full access to the accounts. He won't even see it coming." The USB also contained financial transfers linking Lansbridge to offshore accounts in Graham's name. It was the evidence they needed to expose the full scope of the scheme. While Charles and Lauren focused on the financial aspects, Elena uncovered a personal betrayal that hit even harder. She found a series of emails Victoria had written but never sent. The drafts were chilling. In one, Victoria instructed someone to ensure Elena's applications to Ivy League schools were flagged for incomplete documentation. In another, she discussed how keeping Elena dependent and close would make controlling Charles easier. "She didn't just betray you," Elena said, tears streaming down her face. "She tried to destroy my future too." Charles hugged his daughter tightly. "We'll make sure she never hurts you again." The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source: Joyce, Graham's longtime assistant. She reached out to Lauren with a surprising offer. "I've had enough," she said. "I've watched them ruin too many lives. I'm ready to talk." Joyce provided insider knowledge about Graham and Victoria's operations. She revealed their preferred tactics, their weaknesses, and even the mistakes they'd made along the way. "They're arrogant," Joyce explained. "They think they're untouchable. But they've left a trail and I can help you follow it." Her testimony, combined with the USB drive and toxicology reports, gave the Claremonts the evidence they needed to take their fight to the next level. With every piece of evidence meticulously gathered, the Claremonts were ready. Lauren filed reports with law enforcement, ensuring that Graham and Victoria's crimes couldn't be ignored. Eric worked with his network to track their movements, while Charles prepared for the confrontation that would expose the truth. As they reviewed their plan, Charles turned to Elena. "Are you ready for this?" Elena nodded, her eyes steely. "They underestimated us. But they're about to see just how wrong they were. The Claremonts weren't just fighting for justice. They were fighting to reclaim their lives, their dignity, and their future. And they wouldn't stop until every truth was uncovered, and every betrayal avenged. The Claremonts were no longer a broken family, they were a united force. Their discovery of Victoria and Graham's crimes had revealed more than personal betrayal. It exposed a network of predators that thrived on deception and destruction. Now it was time to strike back. One evening, Charles, Lauren, and Elena sat around the dining table. It was a stark contrast to the tense dinners of the past few months. This time, their energy was focused, their resolve unshakable. "We have everything we need," Lauren began, spreading out the files and evidence they had gathered. "But we can't just hand this over to the authorities and hope for the best. We need to take control of the narrative." Elena leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "You mean we need to make them think they've already won?" Lauren nodded. "Exactly. If they suspect we're onto them, they'll vanish before we can pin them down. We have to make them overconfident." Charles tapped the table thoughtfully. "We'll need to stage this carefully. They've underestimated us so far, we'll let them keep doing that." The first step in their plan was to draw Graham and Victoria out of hiding. Charles decided to play the part of the broken man. He began making public appearances at upscale bars, strategically ensuring that word of his decline reached the right ears. Eric arranged for discreet surveillance. "We need them to think you're spiraling," he explained. "That you've given up." Charles obliged, playing the role to perfection. He showed up at events unshaven, disheveled, and drinking just enough to appear careless. The rumors spread like wildfire. Charles Claremont was a shadow of his former self, a man destroyed by his own failures. It didn't take long for Graham and Victoria to take the bait. They began making bold moves, transferring money from hidden accounts and contacting old associates with new plans. Elena played a critical role in the plan. Her part required precision and emotional control. She would have to reconnect with her mother and pretend to be on her side. It was a dangerous gamble, but Elena was ready. "She taught me how to manipulate," Elena said coldly. "I'll use her own lessons against her." Her first move was subtle, a carefully crafted text message to Victoria, expressing doubt about her father's stability and gratitude for her mother's strength. Victoria, eager to regain control over Elena, responded immediately. "My sweet girl," the reply read. "I always knew you'd see the truth. Let's meet and talk. I've missed you." The meeting was arranged at an exclusive cafe. Elena wore a hidden microphone provided by Eric, ensuring every word would be recorded. When Elena arrived, Victoria greeted her with open arms, her polished smile in place. "Darling, I've been so worried about you," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. Elena played her part flawlessly. "It's been hard, Mom," she said, her voice trembling just enough. "Dad's been different. I don't know what to do." Victoria leaned in, her expression triumphant. "You don't have to worry about him anymore. You've always been my priority, Elena. I'll take care of everything." The conversation shifted to subtle probing. Victoria began planting seeds of doubt about Charles, describing him as unstable and unreliable. Elena nodded along, biting back her anger as her mother's manipulative nature unfolded before her. While Elena worked on Victoria, Eric and Lauren focused on leveraging their unexpected ally, Joyce. As Graham's trusted assistant, Joyce had access to information that even Victoria didn't know. She provided detailed schedules, account numbers, and the names of key associates. "They have a major event coming up," Joyce revealed. "A gala to secure funding for a new charity. It's their way of laundering the stolen money." Lauren's eyes lit up. "That's where we'll make our move." The gala became the centerpiece of their revenge. Charles and Lauren worked with Eric to plan every detail, ensuring the event would become Graham and Victoria's downfall. They gathered key players, law enforcement, journalists, and victims of the network schemes. "We'll expose them publicly," Charles said, his voice steady. "We won't just bring them down, we'll destroy their entire operation." The team devised a multi-layered strategy. Elena would continue feeding information to Victoria, ensuring she felt secure. Charles would make a dramatic appearance at the gala, playing the part of a broken man desperate for reconciliation. Meanwhile, Lauren and Eric would coordinate with the authorities to seize Graham and Victoria's assets in real time. The night before the gala, the Claremonts gathered for a final briefing. Elena practiced her lines, preparing to confront her mother in front of the crowd. Charles reviewed his speech, designed to appear as a desperate plea for forgiveness while subtly setting the stage for the big reveal. Lauren checked the equipment provided by Eric, hidden cameras and microphones that would record every damning word. There's no margin for error, she reminded them. Once this starts, there's no turning back. Charles looked at his family, pride swelling in his chest. They had come so far from the broken state Victoria and Graham had left them in. No matter what happens, he said, we're doing this together. The morning of the gala was deceptively peaceful. Elena had breakfast with Charles, the two of them sharing a quiet moment before the storm. I'm proud of you, Charles said. You've shown strength I never imagined. Elena smiled faintly. I learned it from you, Dad. Lauren arrived soon after, her expression determined. Everything's in place. Tonight we end this. Charles nodded. The stage was set, the players ready. All that remained was for Graham and Victoria to step into the trap. The evening of the gala had arrived. The ballroom of the luxurious Grand Meridian Hotel glittered with wealth and elegance, every detail meticulously designed to exude exclusivity. For Victoria and Graham, this night was meant to cement their status among the elite, a triumphant declaration of their success. But unbeknownst to them, it was about to become the stage for their ultimate downfall. Charles entered the gala alone, deliberately late and visibly disheveled. His suit hung loosely, his tie slightly askew, a stark contrast to the poised and polished man people once admired. Whispers rippled through the room as he moved toward the bar, pretending not to notice the judging eyes that followed him. Is that Charles Claremont? Someone murmured. I heard he's been hitting the bottle hard, another whispered. Charles ordered a drink, nursing it as he scanned the room. Victoria stood near the stage, radiating confidence in a sequin gown. Graham was beside her, charming their guests with his easy smile. They were completely unaware that their carefully constructed world was about to collapse. Across the room, Elena arrived with practiced grace, her hidden microphone already transmitting every word she heard. Victoria's face lit up as she saw her daughter, rushing to greet her. My darling, you look stunning, Victoria gushed, pulling Elena into an embrace. Thanks, Mom, Elena replied, her voice laced with just enough nervousness to seem genuine. I'm so glad you invited me. Victoria smiled conspiratorially. Of course, sweetheart. Tonight is a big step for us, for our future. Graham joined them, flashing Elena a winning smile. It's great to see you again, Elena. Your mother's told me so much about your talent and potential. Elena fought the urge to recoil. Instead, she forced a polite smile. Thank you. I'm just trying to make her proud. Victoria beamed, oblivious to the steel behind her daughter's facade. As the night progressed, the ballroom buzzed with chatter and laughter. Charles continued his act, stumbling slightly as he made his way toward the stage. He took a position near the back, where he could observe without drawing too much attention. Victoria and Graham soon took to the stage, microphones in hand. Good evening, everyone, Graham began, his voice smooth and commanding. Tonight we celebrate not just success, but the power of unity and giving back. Victoria chimed in, her tone warm and maternal. This charity initiative is close to our hearts. It's about helping those in need, building a brighter future for our community. Charles resisted the urge to laugh at the irony. As the applause faded, Charles stepped forward, his voice cutting through the crowd. Unity and giving back, huh? He said, his tone slurred just enough to appear intoxicated. That's rich, coming from you too. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. Victoria's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. Charles, she said sweetly, I didn't realize you'd be joining us tonight. I'm full of surprises, Charles replied, stepping closer. Like this one? He gestured toward the large projection screen behind the stage. At that moment, Lauren, stationed in the audiovisual control room, activated the footage. The screen flickered to life, displaying a series of damning videos. First came the emails. Messages between Victoria and Graham discussing their plans to embezzle money, sabotage Charles's company, and frame him for the fallout. The crowd gasped as the words scrolled across the screen. Then came the videos. Surveillance footage showed Victoria slipping something into Charles's drinks. Another clip captured Graham boasting about their plans to take over Claremont Industries. And finally, the most damning evidence of all, Joyce's testimony recorded and played for the room. Graham and Victoria have been running these schemes for years, Joyce's voice said. This isn't just about Charles. They've destroyed families, stolen fortunes, and even orchestrated accidents to silence those who got in their way. The room erupted into chaos. Guests murmured in shock, some pulling out their phones to record the spectacle. Victoria's face turned pale, her mask of composure slipping for the first time. This is ridiculous, Graham shouted, his voice rising in panic. These are fabricated lies. Charles stepped onto the stage, his voice cutting through the noise. Fabricated? Then perhaps you'd like to explain these, he said, holding up a stack of financial records and toxicology reports. Victoria turned to Graham, her voice a frantic whisper. Do something. But Graham was frozen, his mind racing for a way out. Elena stepped forward, her voice steady and clear. You wanted to control me, Mom? To sabotage my future and keep me under your thumb. But you underestimated me. You underestimated all of us. Victoria's eyes widened. Elena, Save it, Elena snapped, her composure cracking for the first time. You don't get to play the caring mother anymore. Not after everything you've done. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Elena turned to the audience. My mother and Graham didn't just betray my father. They betrayed everyone who trusted them. And tonight we're putting an end to it. As if on cue, Eric entered the room with a team of law enforcement officers. Victoria Claremont and Graham Lansbridge, you're under arrest, he announced, stepping onto the stage. You have the right to remain silent. Victoria screamed as the officers moved toward her, her carefully curated image shattering before everyone's eyes. This is a mistake, she shrieked. You'll regret this. Graham meanwhile tried to flee, but the officers were ready. He was tackled to the ground as the crowd watched in shock. As Victoria and Graham were led out in handcuffs, Charles turned to the crowd. This isn't just about my family, he said, his voice steady. It's about justice for everyone they've hurt. And it's about proving that no matter how much they take from us, we can always fight back. The room erupted into applause. For the first time in months, Charles felt a sense of closure. The predators who had tried to destroy him and his family were finally facing the consequences of their actions. Later that night, back at home, the Claremonts sat together in the living room. There was no celebration, just a quiet sense of relief. We did it, Elena said softly. They're finally gone. Charles nodded, his expression thoughtful. They are. But this isn't the end. There are others like them out there. And we have the tools to stop them. Lauren smiled. Then let's make sure no one else has to go through what we did. As the family sat together, united by their shared victory, they knew they had achieved something far greater than revenge. They had reclaimed their lives and their future. The weeks that followed the gala were a whirlwind of legal battles, media coverage, and emotional reckoning. Charles, Elena, and Lauren stayed united, their focus shifting from confrontation to ensuring that justice was served, not just for themselves but for everyone Victoria and Graham had wronged. Victoria and Graham's trial was the event of the year, drawing attention from across the nation. Every damning piece of evidence was presented: the emails, the surveillance footage, the financial records, and the toxicology reports. Witnesses came forward, each recounting their own experiences with the network of deceit that Victoria and Graham had helped orchestrate. Joyce's testimony was particularly devastating. Calm and composed, she detailed how she had been complicit in their schemes out of fear but ultimately found the courage to expose the truth. I couldn't stand by any longer, she said, her voice resolute. They've ruined too many lives and they would have kept going if no one stopped them. Elena also took the stand, her voice clear and unwavering as she spoke about her mother's betrayal. She didn't just hurt my father, she said. She tried to take away my future. But she forgot one thing: I'm my father's daughter. And we don't give up. Charles watched from the gallery, his heart swelling with pride. His daughter had emerged from the ordeal stronger and more determined than ever. When the verdict came, it was as satisfying as it was inevitable. Victoria was sentenced to 15 years in prison for attempted poisoning, fraud, and conspiracy. Graham received a harsher sentence: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, his crimes spanning decades and involving multiple deaths disguised as accidents. As the sentences were read, Victoria's mask of defiance finally cracked. Her composure gave way to tears, but there was no sympathy in the courtroom. The damage she had caused was too great, the trust she had betrayed too profound. Graham, on the other hand, remained stoic, though his clenched jaw and twitching hands betrayed his frustration. He had always believed he was untouchable. Now he was just another criminal, his empire dismantled and his name disgraced. With the trial behind them, the Claremonts turned their attention to rebuilding. Charles focused on his business, determined to restore it to its former glory. But his mission wasn't just about profits anymore, it was about purpose. He founded a division dedicated to preventing financial exploitation, using his own experience as a guide. Lauren threw herself into her legal work, helping other victims of fraud and abuse seek justice. She became an advocate for systemic change, pushing for stricter regulations to protect individuals and businesses from predators like Victoria and Graham. Elena, meanwhile, found her calling in psychology. Inspired by her experiences, she began researching the effects of narcissistic abuse and financial manipulation. Her work would go on to help countless others understand and recover from similar traumas. One of the Claremont's most significant achievements was the creation of the Claremont Foundation for Justice and Recovery. The foundation provided resources for victims of financial fraud, offering everything from legal assistance to mental health support. Joyce became a key figure in the foundation, using her insider knowledge to help others navigate the complexities of financial recovery. "Every case we take on," she said during an interview, "is a step toward ensuring that people like Victoria and Graham can never hurt anyone again." The foundation's impact was immediate and far-reaching. Within months, it had already helped dozens of victims reclaim their lives, and its reputation continued to grow. Despite their public efforts, the Claremonts also found time to heal as a family. Charles and Elena began sharing moments they hadn't had time for during the chaos. Movie nights, dinners filled with laughter, and quiet walks where they could simply talk. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Elena turned to her father. "Do you think we'll ever be completely over this?" she asked. Charles smiled faintly. "I don't think we'll ever forget," he said. "But we can use what we've been through to make sure others don't have to face the same thing. That's how we move forward." While rebuilding their lives, the Claremonts occasionally had to face reminders of their ordeal. Victoria's name appeared in news headlines whenever updates about her appeals surfaced. Graham's network, though largely dismantled, still held a few loose ends that needed tying up. Charles refused to let these remnants pull them back into the darkness. Instead, he used them as fuel to push their mission further. "Every time they try to resurface," he said, "we'll be there to stop them." Elena's journey took her to new heights. Her research on narcissistic abuse earned her accolades, and she was accepted into a prestigious doctoral program. At her graduation, she delivered a speech that encapsulated everything the Claremonts had fought for. "Betrayal doesn't have to define us," she said to a standing ovation. "We can take the worst moments of our lives and turn them into something meaningful. We can choose resilience, strength, and hope." Charles watched from the audience, tears brimming in his eyes. Elena wasn't just his daughter. She was a testament to the power of perseverance. As the Claremonts looked to the future, they knew their journey wasn't over. The fight for justice and the mission to help others would continue, but they were no longer victims. They were survivors, builders of a legacy rooted in resilience and compassion. Charles often reflected on how far they had come. The betrayal that once threatened to destroy them had instead forged an unbreakable bond. Together they had turned their pain into purpose, their loss into a force for good. And as they moved forward, they carried with them a simple but powerful truth. Justice isn't just about punishing the guilty, it's about empowering the innocent to reclaim their lives and build a better future. 10 years had passed since that fateful night at the gala, and the world had changed for the Claremonts. Their lives, once marked by betrayal and pain, now stood as a testament to resilience, transformation, and justice. Charles sat in his sunlit office, the walls adorned with plaques and photos from the Claremont Foundation for Justice and Recovery. The foundation had grown beyond anything he could have imagined. It now operated internationally, helping thousands of victims of financial fraud and abuse each year. The foundation had also become a driving force behind legislative reforms, ensuring stricter laws to prevent the very crimes that had once torn his family apart. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Elena entered, holding a tablet filled with reports. She was now a renowned forensic psychologist, her groundbreaking research on narcissistic abuse recognized worldwide. Her work had not only contributed to the foundation's success but also inspired countless others to find strength in their struggles. "I just got off the phone with the board," Elena said with a smile. "Our new programs are being adopted in 5 more countries." Charles beamed with pride. "You've done amazing work, Elena." She shrugged playfully. "I had a good role model." Despite their achievements, reminders of their journey remained. Occasionally, news of Victoria and Graham surfaced. Graham, now serving a life sentence, had been all but forgotten, his empire reduced to ruins. Victoria, after years of appeals, had faded into obscurity, her attempts at control and manipulation useless behind prison walls. The Claremonts didn't dwell on these reminders, but they didn't shy away from them either. "They're a part of our story," Lauren often said, "but they don't define us." At a recent foundation gala, a stark contrast to the one that had once served as their battlefield, Charles addressed a crowd of supporters, donors, and survivors. Elena and Lauren stood beside him, each of them a pillar of strength in their own right. "Our story began in betrayal," Charles said, his voice steady and heartfelt. But it didn't end there. We chose to take what was meant to destroy us and turn it into something powerful. Today, this foundation stands as a beacon of hope, proof that even in the darkest times, we can find a way forward. The room erupted in applause, but for Charles, the real victory was seeing the faces of those they had helped. People who had found strength and healing through the foundation's work. As the Claremonts drove home that night, Elena looked out the window, her thoughts drifting. "Do you think they ever realized what they created?" she asked softly. Charles glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "They thought they were breaking us," he said. "But all they did was forge something stronger." And they had. The Claremonts' legacy wasn't just about surviving betrayal, it was about creating a future where others could thrive. Together, they had built something extraordinary, a testament to resilience, justice, and the unbreakable bond of family. And that's how betrayal turned into a battle for justice, and ultimately, a story of resilience. What do you think? Do you believe justice like this is enough to heal such deep wounds? Or do you think there's more to be done? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Your support helps us bring more incredible tales of survival and justice to this channel. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you'll never miss a single episode.